College is the time for experimentation. And no, I don't mean titrating sodium hydroxide with hydrochloric acid in chemistry. I mean forcing yourself to try new things, things that excite you, things that scare you, for how else are we supposed to discover who we are and what we are capable of without constantly pushing the boundaries of our reality? At least, that's the excuse my boyfriend Mike came up with when he suggested a threesome. Sure, I replied. Really? Wow, okay, you're the coolest girlfriend ever. What's the other guy's name? I knew what he meant, but I still enjoyed watching him choke on the soda he was drinking. Mike had been talking a lot about Amy since she joined our lab group in anatomy. I was jealous at first, but after checking out the competition, I had to concede his point. It was hard not watching the supple curves of her body every day as she stripped her sweater over her head to put her lab coat on. I guess I was just relieved Mike was talking to me about it instead of doing something with her behind my back. He wanted me to broach the subject with her because it 51 sleepless nights. 216 sounded less creepy coming from a girl, so I invited her to join Mike and I for drinks after class. Have you ever done anything with a girl before? I asked Amy after our third beer. Mike spluttered in his drink and excused himself to go to the bathroom, and I almost threw the rest of my glass after him. This was his idea. It wasn't fair making me do all the work. Luckily, there wasn't much work that needed doing. Not yet, she replied, a smile playing around the corner of her lips. 2 hours later, all of us were in my room trying to figure out how one person fits in a dorm room bed, let alone 3. It was exciting for me, and I can only imagine how many flashing lights and alarms were blaring inside Mike's head, so I guess it was understandable that he spent most of the time focused on Amy. Besides, Mike and I were already comfortable with each other, so it was really just her that he felt the need to impress. Afterward he said it wasn't the case, but I still remember spending way too long hanging out and watching them go at it. I even left to use the bathroom at one point without either of them noticing I was gone. I didn't want to get mad. I had agreed to this after all, and I hated the idea of being one of those infamous girlfriends who said one thing and did another. I just wanted to get even. It didn't help that he started acting cocky afterward, as though that experience made him a big man or something. He even started pointing out particularly geeky-looking freshmen and saying things like I bet he's never even been with one, let alone 2. Although asking for another guy started out as a joke, I Tobias Wade, Com 217 started pushing for it more seriously. I wanted him to feel what it was like to be jealous. I wanted him to appreciate what I had done for him, and realize I was the only one of us who had the power to make it happen again. And yeah, if I'm being honest, maybe I even wanted to humiliate him a little so he'd go back to regular old Mike and drop this macho facade. We started having fights about it, and the more he said no, the more one-sided our relationship seemed. I told Amy I thought I was going to have to dump him. She and I still hung out sometimes, although I never invited Mike when we did. I told her it wasn't her fault, but she still felt guilty about getting between us literally. That's why she came up with a solution. I know a place where they do it in a group. You'll get your kinks out, he'll have someone of his own to have fun with, and everyone is wearing a mask so nobody gets hurt. Big rubber animal masks. Didn't it get hot in there? I felt more than a little exposed wearing my stupid Mardi Gras mask I picked up at the dollar store on the way here. Everyone else's mask was hyper-realistic and covered their entire head, but they told me not to worry about it and just relax. Mike and I were just initiates on a trial run anyway. If we decided this was our thing and we respected all of their rules and members, then they'd give us a full mask next time. At first I stuck pretty close to Mike, and we just fooled around with each other and watched. There was about a dozen people in total, and the teeming mass of bodies was pretty damn intimidating to approach. Several of them had covered their bodies in some kind of paint or oil, and they churned and writhed against each other with an almost animalistic intensity. Everywhere I looked, breasts were heaving, indiscriminate hands clutched and pulled on skin, and bodies lunged hungrily 51 sleepless nights 218 at one another as though nourished by their carnal lust. I was about to call it quits and leave when a man in a panther pulled away from the others to approach me. His body was chiseled and slick with paint. Mike and I exchanged glances. Isn't this what I wanted? I pointed him in the direction of a leopard mask with fiery red hair spilling out beneath it. He hesitated, so I gave him a little shove. If nothing else, this would be a shared experience we could laugh and bond over, and maybe we'd both be stronger for it. I still shuddered a bit when the panther man put his hand on my shoulders from behind, but his probing fingers expertly massaged down my back and I felt myself melt into his touch. Mike left shortly after that. We'd only been there about a half hour, and I was really starting to enjoy myself, when I saw him staring at me and the panther man. Good. Let him see. But then he just turned around and walked away, and my satisfaction quickly drained. I followed him, and we had another fight in the hallway while we were both still naked. He said he couldn't even look at me again after seeing me like that. Somehow the fact that he was more hurt and sensitive than me proved that he cared more about me than I did him, so it was over. He got dressed and left, and I just stood there overflowing with frustration. I felt massaging hands caressing my shoulders again, and I immediately felt the tension flowing out through them. If I was looking for a rebound to get past Mike, then I couldn't think of a more immersive, therapeutic one than this. I allowed the panther man to lead me back into the room. The lights had dimmed since I was gone, but a lot of the paint people wore was glowing in the dark. More hands grabbed me, and I allowed myself to be swallowed up in the psychedelic dance of skin on Tobias Wade. Com 219 skin, swirling colors, and the growing moan which encompassed me. As the night went on, the lights continued to slowly dim. The colors grew brighter, and the intensity of the sound and insistence of the sensation mounted into a crescendo of pleasure. I spent most of my time with the panther man, although I allowed myself to be passed from one person to the next without complaint. There was no embarrassment, no judgment, no jealousy, only the acceptance and triumph of our shared celebration of life. I was back with the panther man now, body flooded with gentle warmth and satisfaction. His hands were so powerful yet gentle, and his low moans resonated with my own as though we were a single being harmonized with itself. The thought of leaving here and never knowing who he was, perhaps never even meeting him again, was more agonizing than I could have imagined. I felt an overpowering desire to look at the man pressed against me, just for a second, just long enough to recognize him if we met again. I slid my hands up his neck and tenderly slipped the mask further up his face, but it wouldn't come off. I pulled harder, and felt the strain of living fur beneath my fingers. He grunted in pain, or was that a snarl? And I pushed him off me. Suddenly every sound came to its height, and the mounting carnal cacophony enveloping me became tainted with other sounds. Were those moans? Or was someone starting to howl? And then a yelping joined in. I thought it was a joke at first, but one by one the people began to bray, bark, hiss, or whatever other sound was appropriate to the mask they wore. The panther man knelt upon the ground and I saw his muscles coil as though preparing to spring. It was so dark that I could only see the 51 sleepless nights. 220 parts of him covered in paint, and from a few steps away, he looked more like an abstract painting than a man. I ran toward the door, but tripped over a dark form along the way. A multitude of hands clung onto me in the shadows, and then a paw with razor-sharp claws tore the skin on my outer thigh. I screamed and pushed onward, but the grips readily released me as though shocked I wasn't appreciating their touch. I made it to the wall, but I couldn't find the door. The panther man crawled toward me on all fours. Some of the glowing paint was on his skin, but more of it was matted in patches of thick black hair on his body. I leaped along the wall looking for the door, ramming against another body and falling to the ground. The half-panther was almost on top of me now, but I couldn't bear to look at him. I closed my eyes and screamed for all I was worth. "Are you okay? What are you doing?" I opened my eyes. The lights were on. Everyone was staring at me. The panther man with his chiseled human body was standing over me. He pulled on his furry ear, and I almost screamed again before seeing the rubber mask slide easily off. He was a handsome man, about 30, with strong cheekbones and deep concerned eyes. I ran out the door and dressed in the hallway. The pantherman started to follow me. "Stop her! She's seen too much," he shouted, his voice a harsh guttural snarl completely unlike the one he used a moment before. A woman in a sheep's mask held him back. "Let her go. She'll come back when she's ready." The voice sounded familiar. Was Tobias Wade, Com 221 that Amy? I didn't stay long enough to find out. As soon as my clothes were even halfway on, I ran. I'm not going back. I can't go back. But maybe I'll have to, because I still need answers. I missed my period the next month, but I tried not to think back to that night. I was on the pill, and they all had protection. Just to be safe, I got a pregnancy test, but it came up negative. I kept testing every month after that. Still nothing. But all the symptoms were beginning to show. I'm swelling up, I'm tired all the time, and nauseous in the mornings. I got an ultrasound, but the doctor said he didn't see anything. It's just like a great, empty pit is growing inside of me. I got a few other scans, but nothing came up and the doctor just thinks it's a hysterical pregnancy which will pass on its own. I didn't know how to tell him I thought it was something else, just like I didn't know how to explain the claw marks on my outer thigh. I want to forget it ever happened, but it's hard when I keep feeling something scratching me from the inside.